Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Punic Wars Part 3. We're going to be discussing the final war between Carthage and Rome. Of course, spoiler alert, Carthage loses, Rome wins, but you should have figured that out by now. Um, you'll see on the screen, this is a depiction of a potential battle between the Romans and the Carthaginians. The Romans, of course, are in the ships. The Carthaginians are in the city behind it. So this is going to be probably one of the more brutal discussions about the war between Romans and Carthaginians. So prepare yourself. The reason for this war has multiple possible reasons and no clear reason. The Carthaginians were trying to continue to grow stronger, even though they had just lost the Second Punic Wars. But they seemed to be resilient after the first one, and they bounced back, and they had started to bounce back in after the Second Punic War, and Rome had beaten them. Of course, that's the story with Hannibal and Scipio Africanus, which you should have discussed already or learned about. So that battle was titanic in itself between two great generals, and who ended up winning. This is not so titanic as much as destructive. So there's this guy, Cato the Elder. Now, he is a statesman of ancient Rome. He is a guy who has been pushing since the day he could join the Senate to defeat Carthage. That is, he said it, that Carthage must be destroyed. Carthage must be destroyed, is what he would say. Carthio delanda este, which means Carthage must be destroyed. So Cato the Censor, or Cato the Elder, as he is sometimes known, he's pushing for Rome to go to war, pushing. Finally, there's a threat of uh, of the Carthaginians becoming stronger. There's a real possibility. There's also the fact that the Carthaginians attacked a friend and ally of Rome, Numidia. So it was kind of justified, kind of not justified. Numidia had, we're not going to get into the details, but Numidia was just as guilty as Carthage was. So there's really, but Rome, being the ally that it was, went to war against Carthage, landed troops, and besieged the city. Now, you can see the city in the background. It has a rather magnificent port, one of the best ports in the entire history of the ancient world. It's got two ports. It's got a commercial port and then a military port. You can see them relatively okay in that image. Very, very much a lot of commerce. This is why Carthage did so well with selling and buying and trading, because they had a naval port that was fantastic, and they also had a naval fleet for most of their time that was also fantastic. They had a spirit of sailing ships, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew how to get around the Mediterranean. So, accepting that, the Romans had also learned how to do all that, were able to land a large army, and they surrounded the city and sieged it, which means, by the way, that they wouldn't let anybody in or out, and they began attacking. So this went on. The siege was like almost 2 years long. And finally, a gentleman known Scipio Aemilius comes along, Aemilicanus comes along, and he takes over in the second year, and he immediately, gets into Rome. He raises a huge army. He's given all kinds of special powers, and he goes in and he attacks Rome, or attacks Carthage right off the bat. He's able to sneak in there at night and create a lot of disturbance and get a pretty good foothold. The point of the story is he's eventually realizing that he can't hold it, and he retreats. But in the process of retreating, he loses several of his soldiers, who are kept prisoner by the Carthaginians. Carthaginians then kill them in front of all the Romans. At this point, you can imagine that the Romans were unwilling to stop their war. So I just want to backtrack. Before all that happened, before the siege, I want to make sure that you understand how this kind of got to this point. So, as we go back 2 years to when Carthage attacked Numidia and things just started to settle down, Rome sends an army and a consul, because the consul was in charge of the army. You should know that from our previous discussions. Sends a consul with an army to North Africa, where Carthage is, and the Carthaginians send an ambassador and a whole group of ambassadors to the Roman camp. The Roman camp says, "Okay." The consul says, "Listen, you want to prove to us that you don't want war. I get that, because the Carthaginians didn't want war. They had already lost two, and they didn't like what happened after losing two. So the Carthaginians were almost begging to have peace. And so the Romans said, "You know what? We'll give you a chance. Every single one of your soldiers that has armor or swords, they have to turn them over to us." The ships in Carthage were loaded up with arms and armor. Some say up to 200,000 suits of armor were loaded on the ships, transported to where the Roman camp was in Utica, and unloaded. And the Romans say, "Well, that's a great show of faith, but this is also what we want you to do. We want you to leave Carthage itself and move about 12, 15 miles down the road. We're going to destroy every single building in the city of Carthage. We're going to tear down the walls, throw them throw them into the ocean, and we're going to rid the world of present day Carthage." That was, as you may imagine, completely unacceptable to the Carthaginians, who then said, "We are not going to have peace." Unfortunately, they had already given up all their armor and arms, but they were able to manage. You have to think about that for a second. Was there really possibility for peace? Was that something that could have happened? Seriously, the Romans said, "We're going to force you all to move. Pick up and then move away from where you live now." That's not really much of a choice. Imagine if you were given that option at your house, told that you're going to move to some place that doesn't have a house, doesn't have housing yet, isn't organized, is a totally fresh new start, and you lose everything that you've worked so hard for. The answer is pretty clear on what you would do, I think. I think most of you would probably say, "No, we're not moving," which is exactly what the Carthaginians said. And so now, 2 years later, they're facing a general who knows what he's doing and is the grandfather of the previous Scipio Africanus, or grandson. He's the grandson of the previous Scipio Africanus who won in the Second Punic Wars. Now, you don't have to know all these details. Just you got to know who won and how they won. This is it. Carthage loses, but this general that the Romans have, it he finally breaks through, and it takes him 6 days to conquer the entire city. That's not because the city was necessarily fighting him tooth and nail. They might have been. It was because as he was going along, he was killing as many of the civilians, many of these families, as he could. He would rotate his soldiers through every few hours, every half a day, to send them to continue to round up civilians to kill. They would break through doors. They would listen for the sounds of people making noise and then drag them out in the street and kill them. This is what the Roman legions did to Carthage. This is because there was so much hatred and so much just like we don't want Rome to have to go through this again with another war with Carthage. So we're going to end it now. In a sense, it makes kind of way it makes sense, right? I mean, it does make a little bit of sense in the sense that we're dealing with an enemy that's already stood up twice after we beat them down. Who's to say they won't do it again? And so the Romans decide that they're not going to allow the Carthaginians to survive. And so for 6 days, they go through and kill as many of the Carthaginians man, woman, child, as they can. And towards the end of the 6th day, Hasdrubal, who was the commander of the army, went to Scipio Aemilius and treaty and everything like that, and said, "I'm willing to surrender if you'll stop this slaughter. If you'll stop this slaughter and you don't kill me in your triumph." Well, Scipio Aemilius says, "Sure, he'll take that deal." Upon hearing this, according to legend, Hasdrubal's wife heard that in fact her husband had betrayed everything. Yes, the city would have been wiped out. Yes, all the inhabitants would have been killed, but you would have at least died with honor, is what she's thinking, by not surrendering. But you surrendered, she says to Hasdrubal, and then she takes her kids and kills them and throws herself into the flame, into a fire, killing her because she's so embarrassed by her husband. Now, the reason why I tell you that is because she knew that everybody in the city was going to die. There was almost 800,000 people, they say, at one point inside of Carthage. And when the blood and the blooding and the killing and the murdering and all that was done, there was only 50,000 who were sold off as slaves. So you think about the number of people who died. It's pretty massive. They suggested it's 800,000, which would have been a very large city for that ancient time. It had been around for 700 years. That's something you may not realize. Carthage had been around where it stood for 700 years. That's longer than Rome at this point. So, some people say that it had to do with competing ideologies on the way they ran things. It could have been other things, but regardless, Cato the Elder, Cato the Censor, got his way, and Carthage was defeated. And to ensure that there would never ever be a raising of Carthage, the slaves were sold in Rome. But for the next year, the Romans tore down all the buildings, all the walls of the ancient Carthaginians, leaving nothing that could possibly allow them to rebuild the city. Not that there was any people left, but maybe somebody would come by and start trying to build the city again. We're going to get more into what this land was used for that was destroyed by the Romans and became part of the public lands, but it's still a very controversial topic for that time period. All right, so that's the end of the Third Punic War. It leaves Rome in charge of the entire sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Black Sea for that matter, if they wanted it. There was no one who could stand against them on the land or in the water. The Romans were supreme. And going forward, keep that in mind, that's a big benefit for them, and also a possible reason why the Romans did decide to go to war with the Carthaginians, because they were tired of the Romans or the Carthaginians, or they were just didn't want the competition. It could have been just that simple, the competition. That's it for now. Make sure you listen to this. Do your work. Follow the slideshows order for you to help you with the reading and the writing coming up.